Good evening. This is Redwood Wonk on Access Humboldt and KZZH. My name is Eric Kirk. Chuck Rogers is with me. We are here to discuss national politics. A lot going on. Not too much to talk about Trump today. We may actually only mention Trump a few times, but why don't we start with, the takeover of the Senate by the Democrats finally today, taking over the committees, and talk about the different positions that each of the leaders are. You've got the House leader, now Majority Leader still Nancy Pelosi. You've got Kevin McCarthy kind of assuming the leadership, if you can call it that, on the Republican side. You've got Mitch McConnell, sort of being quiet about what he thinks about Trump these days. Early on, after the insurrection, they were all kind of strong about it, but they see as we get further away from it, the Republicans are starting to realize they've still got a big Trump problem, and that's going to come to the floor tomorrow. We'll talk a little bit about that. Chuck, where do you want to start?
Well, since you started with the party leadership, yeah, it really is a tale of two different parties for sure, maybe more than that at this point, come to think of it. But the Democrats do seem to be all in line with Speaker Pelosi and with Schumer in the Senate and with the executive branch with Biden and his team that they're going to go bold. They have a plan for what they want to do with regard to COVID stimulus, and they're moving forward with that. They're moving forward on a lot of different issues, and they are realizing that they have the support of, in some cases, more than 70% of the public on a lot of these issues. So they're taking advantage of that, and they're moving forward. By contrast, though, the Republican Party really has, and it's obvious, I think, even to Republicans, splintered into two very different political parties right now in Washington, with the QAnon side and with the other Republicans who are not quite sure at this point what to do. And I think that's evident. Minority Leader McCarthy in the House had a challenge in front of him as to what to do with newly sworn in Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia, who's the QAnon person. And he punted. He didn't know what to do. He issued a kind of a slap on the wrist statement saying she should tone it down. But in response, the Democrats we're recording this on a Wednesday, so on Thursday, February 4th, they're going to vote on a resolution to remove her from her committee assignments. So that's where we are. And it's going to be fascinating to see what happens with the Republican Party, because they really are at a crossroads here. They need to decide where they're going to go. McConnell in the Senate issued a statement about the Marjorie Taylor Greene, without naming her, issue, and he seems to be wanting to go back toward the traditional Republican Party route, but others not so much. In fact, in the Senate, I think Josh Hawley voted against every Biden pick so far for cabinet confirmation. I think he's the only senator who's voted against everybody so far.
Well, and Green is going to be a focal point. I watched the hearings today, the House Rules Committee hearings. It's going to be set on to the floor tomorrow for debate and vote as to whether to remove her from the two committees she's been assigned. Now, let's take into account, this is the woman who basically harassed a child. A Parkland survivor, maybe he's 18, but that's still a child, especially somebody who is suffering from PTSD, where there are goofy conspiracy theories about it, saying he was taking George Soros money and all of this kind of stuff, and talking about how she was carrying a gun. And he ignored her, and she called him a coward. I mean, there's a 30-plus-year-old woman has no business calling a teenager a coward. I mean, I'm sorry. Right. It's just, especially when they've been through something like that. So that's one extreme. There's also videos surfacing of her calling for assassination of Democratic Party figures, and of course, she has, spread a bunch of the crazy stuff about the election. basically full on Trump. Apparently had a conversation with Trump, she claims, a couple of days ago. And yeah, McCarthy just basically avoided it, just doesn't want to do it. Now, today's hearing was interesting because none of the Republicans defended her. They all were opposed to the process. Oh, this is an unprecedented process. You're not, doing it the way it's supposed to be done. It's not really inappropriate for the whole Congress, instead of just a party, to take people out of committees. You should leave it to the Republicans. The Democrats are saying, we gave you days, and you didn't do it. This is the thing. So we are done with this. Apparently, there's precedent for what they're about to do, but that's going to be the argument tomorrow, well, this is not the proper process, and it's going to be sort of back like for the impeachment hearing when McConnell was blocking any evidence and refusing to honor subpoenas, and so basically they were arguing in court, well, you should subpoena people, in Congress, in the Senate, you should subpoena people at the same time, as Schiff said, you can't make this stuff up. They were telling the courts that the subpoenas are unenforceable. So, you've got this thing, they're saying, well, you should leave it to the Republicans. Republicans aren't going to do anything because they've got a problem. They've got probably 2/3 of their base is still Trump supporting, and will continue to be until more Republicans, take brave stands and maybe sacrifice their careers going down, like possibly Liz Cheney has done. We'll see. I would be a little nervous if I was Trump, or I forget the name of Matt Gaetz going to her state to complain against her, because I don't think I would want, Cheney, Father Cheney, to be my enemy. But that's going to be their civil war. Tomorrow, we're going to see basically the Democrats going at her, and tooth and nail. She doesn't care. She doesn't want to be on committees anyway. She said today she wants to go out and try to get more Q people to run in primaries against Republicans and do that. She said she's a populist. She's not somebody who actually went there to work, so she doesn't really care. But she's a liability to the Republicans, and tomorrow's probably going to be basically establish a referendum on her, and she's going to be, and the Democrats will probably try to paint her as the representative of what the party is now, even more than Trump.
I agree. And I think there are going to be some Republicans who are very angry with Kevin McCarthy for putting them in this position. McCarthy had the chance to remove her from her committee assignments, and she's been assigned to two committees. One is Education and Labor, and the other is Budget. And he had the opportunity to remove her from those committees, but he did not do it. The Democrats said, if you don't do that, we are going to bring a resolution to the floor to that effect, to remove her from those two committees. That, of course, will force Republicans to go on the record taking one side or the other. And as divided as the Republican Party is right now, and as vocal as the Republican base is right now, Republicans don't want to have to take that vote, especially with midterm elections coming up, in 2022. And some of them, may be at risk for a primary if they take the wrong vote here. On the other hand, if they vote to go against the Democratic-supported resolution to remove her from committees, then they risk blowback from the more moderate part of whatever district they're from. So McCarthy really, I think, he might have done some damage to his career by not being a profile in courage and doing the obvious right thing. This should not have been a difficult choice for anyone with a conscience to just remove her from the committees and be done with it. But instead, he's going to force his whole conference to take a vote on the record tomorrow.
And she's not going to get any less crazy. She's just going to keep moving forward, and she's going to get a microphone. She may kind of replace Trump as the standard bearer of the crazy. I mean, that's just it, because she's just, Trump would say, Q what? He'd pretend like he didn't know what it was, and the rest. But this is, the Democrats, in terms of what she represents, is it's a fundraising bonanza for them, and they get to paint this as the Republican Party because people will have to either agree, yeah, she speaks for what the Republican Party is today, or say or say no, I don't agree with her, and then face the wrath of the Trump voters. They've got a problem.
They do. You and I talked about this, I don't know if it was last week or the week before, that the Republicans have been presented with an exit ramp because of the insurrection and because of the craziness of QAnon, and they just have not taken the exit ramp, and now they're paying for it. So now they're going to go on record one way or the other. And a few minutes ago, you mentioned Liz Cheney in Wyoming. Of course, there's only one congressional district in Wyoming, and she is the congressperson representing all of Wyoming. You mentioned Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz went there to campaign against her, to speak against her, because she voted, she took a vote against Trump already. And so they're trying to make her pay for that. And it could be that Marjorie Taylor Greene's job just becomes rounding up primary opponents for all of the Republicans that they don't think are on the correct side of things. Maybe that's exactly what she's going to be doing. So, maybe it's going to be to her advantage not to be on committees, as you suggested.
And she does that, of course. Any of those primaries, whether they win or lose, whether they hold on, they're going to have to appeal to the crazy base in order to win those primaries. So win or lose, it's going to make it harder for them to win in the general election in any mixed ideology district. I mean, the gerrymandered ones will they'll just stick with the crazy, but and you've got two Q people in there, by the way. You've got the other Q person, and I'm forgetting her name already.
Lauren Boebert.
She also attacked the Parkland kid. She doubled down on it and said, "You shut up, child. You had a chance to stand up for what you believe when my twin was hassling you on the street." And he actually responded by saying, your evil twin was threatening me with a gun, or at least with the idea of a gun. Right. So. Yeah, I mean, it's not going to get any easier. The Republicans have got to decide where they want to go, and it looks like McCarthy initially, was critical of Trump and is now backing off it, now hedging at what he actually said. And you're going to see, again, just like with tomorrow's hearings, the Republicans are going to oppose the impeachment on the basis that it's not constitutional. They're not going to defend Trump. Right. I mean, that's how it's going. And that brings us to, I want to talk a little bit about what we can expect. It starts, I think, a week from yesterday. Right. And the Democrats are planning to bring witnesses. Graham is basically saying no witnesses. If there's even one witness, I'm going to call the FBI, and that might open a Pandora's box. I'm hoping the Democrats call the FBI. I'm hoping they don't just play excerpts from his speeches and say that's what done. I want to know what Trump knew and when he knew about what was the makeup of that crowd. So I hope the Democrats are planning to bring the FBI in. I don't see how that's going to help Graham or the opposition to the impeachment unless the FBI actually kept the information from Trump.
I don't know. I agree with you. I think Democrats should say, great, Senator Graham, go ahead, call them. We would love to question them. And, if he does that, then, of course, there's going to be a lot of information that the FBI has that the public hasn't seen yet, probably, that will come into the impeachment trial. Now, maybe some of it will not be made public, but certainly the jurors, the senators, will see it. Yeah. So, depending upon the nature of it. But I think that's exactly what's going to happen. The Republicans are just going to say this is unconstitutional, and of course, as you know, according to most legal scholars, it is absolutely constitutional. But yeah, that's the only tack they have at this point, because everybody saw this on live television, and so this is not a case where they can dispute the facts exactly, because everybody knows what happens and everybody heard the speeches and saw all the tweets. And by the way, this didn't just happen at the rally on January 6th. Trump had been setting this up for months before.
Yes.
During the campaign, he said, before the election, the only way I can lose is if this is rigged. And I mean, he said that 1,000 times. So he was setting all this up, knowing that he was having trouble in the polls leading up to the election. So this wasn't just January the 6th. And so we'll see what's going to happen. But yeah, I think Graham just doesn't have a leg to stand on. And he's just hoping that a threat of calling FBI witnesses will scare people. In fact, I think it'll enhance the Democrats' case.
Well, see, they're not even worried about the case because we know there's probably isn't going to be a conviction. They aren't going to get 67 senators to do it. But what it's going to do is embarrass the Republicans and especially senators who have to win statewide. He's upset with that. He doesn't want this. So he doesn't want witness. He wants it to be done by a stipulation of facts. And it's like, no, we need the witnesses. We need there to be coverage of, hourly coverage of it. And apparently they're planning to have Ray of the FBI come and testify anyway a couple weeks later, but that'd probably be in closed session because there's a lot of questions unanswered. They probably, if they were brought in, say, I can't answer that, national security, we can go into closed session or whatever. But he is, Graham, more than anyone else, is desperate to stop that from happening because, first of all, he participated in some of it himself. He made a phone call to the Georgia Secretary of State. And that's all going to come out. He is an accomplice as far as I'm concerned. And there's probably going to be a lot of discussion of Cruz. And Ocasio-Cortez released a video this week. And it kind of rambles. She's young, but also kind of still in PTSD a little bit, revealed that she was a survivor of sexual assault. Right-wing media immediately pounced on that, saying, where's your proof? Who is it? Blah, 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 and the rest. But she talked about it, and she was scared to death. It turned out it was actually a officer assigned to it who came in and was yelling, where is she? But she didn't know that. She was hiding from this guy because he was obviously stressed. I don't know if we'll ever hear his story, but she thought she was going to die, literally thought she was going to die. And so she's not in the mood for Ted Cruz and the others to say, let's move on. This was an attempted coup, and it really needs to be treated that way. And so I hope that the Democrats press forward with it. I hope that they welcome the FBI there. I hope they call them themselves.
Yeah, I do too. Just a couple of things there. Ocasio-Cortez it turns out, was hiding in Congresswoman Katie Porter's office. Katie Porter is from California, the area around Irvine, and she's had a lot to say about it as well. So yeah, a traumatic experience for anybody, which raises the point that all of those senators who are going to be jurors were also victims of this insurrection. So they know exactly what happened. The reason I'm glad that the Democrats are moving forward with this, even though we kind of know what the final count is going to be, and I agree with you, it's unlikely they'll get 67 senators to convict. But that aside, the real reason I'm glad they're moving forward with it is this, and you know this. Anything that happens on the Senate floor becomes a part of the congressional record, which is a permanent record. So when historians are looking back at this and writing the history of this, the truth will be there for them.
Yes.
This is not going to be something that can be spun by Republican strategists, just lying about the whole thing. All the briefs, everything that is said, all of it will be in the congressional record. Anything that witnesses say, anything that the jurors, the senators say, anything that the House managers who are bringing this case to the Senate, it's all going to be in the congressional record. So at least we know that the truth will be there.
Yeah, and it's there's only going to be clarity that as it moves on, because the FBI is investigating and building cases against the insurrectionists, many of whom are not in, by the way, white supremacist groups. They're just basic Trumpers, a lot of them, who are doing this crazy stuff. And they're starting to turn on Trump a little bit. Wait a minute, why don't we get our pardon? Why is, why I went there on his insistence. I was there because he wanted me there. And that's I don't, apparently a couple of them have offered to come and testify. I think the crazy guy with the horns is one of them. I don't think the Democrats want to go there, but to testify, this is what we thought he wanted. And so no matter how many times, the Republicans will bring up that he said peaceful once in the speech, he said fight, 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 don't be weak about 20 times and got them whooped up. I mean, do we really think that when they were giddy in that video that before he went out to the speech where Don Jr.'s girlfriend, our governor's former wife, I'm forgetting her name,
Milfoil,
dancing giddily, were they all that giddy about a crowd that was just going to go and wave signs and chant slogans? No, they expected something to happen. And anyway, we'll probably talk more about it because we'll be 2 days into the trial next week.
I'm just glad that the Democrats are moving forward. It's going to be in the congressional record, so at least the truth will be there for historians.
Yeah. Meanwhile, we've got, other things happening. Finally, certain measures are having to come up in Congress. I'm not sure what's happening with the immigration bill that was introduced. I think they're used to, under McConnell, the Senate didn't do a lot of work. They took a lot of days off. And so I think they're all starting to get used to having to work every day. And of course, what has come up is the COVID bill. And we have that, the Republicans trying to keep Biden to promise the bipartisanship. And in their version, it means not using the reconciliation method to avoid the filibuster. He met with 10. Biden met with 10 Republicans that to discuss possible compromise. They came in with a bill that's a third the size of what they wanted, completely inadequate. We know this from 10 years ago or 11 years ago when when Obama settled for less than the Democrats, hoping they would get more. That would always be blocked. And they want to significantly lower the $1,400 checks, and they don't want the relief for local governments because that's being called a blue state bailout and the rest. And so Biden apparently said, I think yesterday, no, I want the 1,400. I'm open to a more targeted, lower income for it, but I want the 1,400, and it is going to be close to 2 million. We cannot afford to go passive on this. We need to move forward to pull us out of the jam, get people out there giving vaccines, getting the testing and the tracking done that was never really started on the federal basis. And he said, his spokesperson on NPR this morning said, when they were asked, well, how is that bipartisan? Saying, well, we intend to introduce some things that Republicans have brought up. It will be bipartisan in substance because it's stuff that they're interested in. Even if they pull what they pulled with ACA, where Chuck Grassley demanded all this stuff be in the Obamacare bill, and then at the last minute said, and by the way, I'm not going to vote for it. So even if they don't vote for it, Biden's saying it will be bipartisan. We're taking seriously some of the things that the Republicans have said they wanted, and they'll be in the bill. So that's what he means by bipartisan. But they're not messing around with this. They are moving forward already with the reconciliation process.
Yeah. I have to think that those 10 Republicans, given that they only wanted $600 million versus the $1.9 trillion, they were trying to call the Democrats bluff, I think. I think they knew that the difference between 600 and 1.9 is so drastic that nobody would accept that. On the other hand, again, another opportunity for the Republicans that they missed. They could have made, as you suggested, a reasonable counteroffer that just made the stimulus checks that are going to be sent out a little more targeted. And I think that there might have been a chance that depending upon how the negotiations went, they might have gotten somewhere on that.
Yeah.
But they didn't. And it just boggles the mind that they have all these opportunities and they're just not interested in policy or governing. And that can take you only so far. Eventually, things are going to splinter and you're going to run out of oxygen. The Republicans need to get on board with getting things done, and they're just not doing it. And I'm glad that Biden and his team are standing firm on this and saying this is going to be 1.9 and the checks are going to be $1,400 and here's who they're going to go to. Because they're in a bit of a honeymoon time right now. The Republicans are still a little shocked by the loss of the White House and the Senate, and they still don't have the House. They lost 2 seats in a deep red state in the South. And so they're still a little shocked. And so the Democrats, this is their time to go bold. And I'm glad that so far, they're still doing that.
I agree. So far they are. So far the orders, I don't have complaints about any of the executive orders so far, except that some of them are like kind of punting down for a later. I won't say punting, but setting up a commission and the rest. I wish he would just order the current. It's like it's under 2,000 asylum seekers who were forced to go to Mexico to wait for their hearings. I wish they would just let them in. I got, of course, a personal bias there because I live next door to a woman who have 2 asylum seekers who got in, but one of them has a daughter who's stuck in Tijuana, and living it pretty hard because of Trump's rule. I wish that Biden would just reverse that, at least for those people, regardless of the overall process. But I'm hopeful that that's going to happen. I just wish it would happen sooner. But that's about my biggest criticism of it. And you're hearing it from the left. All they're saying is, well, it's not enough. Well, of course it's not. It's just an executive order, but it sets the policy. It looks like Biden is also going to go really big on trying to come up with sustainable non-emission energy system, wanting to have a grid where the power sources are spread out. Powering large batteries basically are the only large things, and which could, if implemented, be major developments in alternative energy and set a standard for the world. He's thinking big, right? I mean, and he apparently really wants to do that. He's not just taking the technocratic approach of trying to manage all of this stuff. He does look. He's definitely more aggressive with climate change than Obama was.
Absolutely. And as he should be at this point, because not much has been done. I mean, we're so far behind. The scientists keep telling us how far behind we are on this. And also the power grid that you mentioned. People have been telling us for decades now that it needed work. We needed to do work on this. And the other thing is about, his plans for all this. He can also argue that this will create jobs. And, who knows exactly how many and exactly where, but a bold kind of strategy like that, of course, it's going to create some jobs. It might require some folks to be retrained in new areas, but that's all right, too.
I agree. And one of the things the Republicans and the right are trying to come up with things to hit Biden on the Keystone. They're saying, well, he came in and fired 1,000 people, and then it's up to 4,000, and now people are arguing it's 100,000. It doesn't take into account what's going to be made up with what that's going to do. It's it's not a fixed sum there, and a lot of the people fired are Canadians. It's interesting that right wingers are so concerned about Canadian jobs. I mean, that's a downside, but not to sound melodramatic, but they lost jobs when they shut down death camps, right? I mean, it's not just because it loses job, that's not the be all and end all. It's you need to be able to change and do things, and sometimes jobs are lost just because economic realities change and technological realities change. So the point is that if we have these policies, it will be a net gain in jobs. And because alternative and sustainable energy is, in fact, a very labor-intensive industry, and to spend money in that, and if we could ever move away from the military-industrial complex, so named by a Republican president, by the way, which is capital-intensive and not as good.
One of the things that I wanted to point out that we were talking about a little bit earlier was just a poll that has come out recently. And what some of the state Republican parties are doing that's a little concerning to me. And I'm talking about Texas, even Oregon, our neighbor, Hawaii, and Arizona. The official party in each of those states, the Republican Party in each of those states has been issuing, in each case, statements about the fact that they are on board with strategies like those of Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert. And in fact, the state of Texas has even adopted some of the same language that they're seeing. So I think that that's going to be a problem going forward. I don't know how that's going to play out, but it just seems to me that there is a power vacuum right now in the Republican Party. And it makes me wonder if there's going to be a Republican candidate, probably young, I don't know who or when, who is going to step into that void and start siphoning off independents who left the Republican Party. And there are statistics to document that the Republicans are losing people. Thousands of people in each state, sometimes in some cases 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 people just since the election who have changed their registration. And there's going to be some smart, clever young Republican who's going to notice that and see an opportunity. And that may be the way this gets solved. I'm just not sure.
Unless Trump starts his own party, well, and then maybe.
I think that may be, as counterintuitive as this might seem, I think that might be the best thing that could happen to the Republican Party, because that would siphon away some of the folks who are creating this dilemma for the party right now. And it would allow the Republican Party that you and I would recognize to begin to rebuild. Now, that's going to take time. And in the interim, they would not be very successful nationally, but they could rebuild at the state and local level that way and eventually become nationally relevant again. So, that could happen, and we'll see if it does. I don't know. The reason I'm not sure that's going to happen is because that would take a lot of work, and I'm not sure Trump wants to put all the work in to do that, but we'll see.
The issue I think that the Republicans also have is they've got to really finally come to terms with the culture war. They're still arguing against equality of marriage. They're still, taking huge anti-immigration stand that just isn't reflective of what the nation as a whole holds, let alone the values that we pretend to do. I mean, for crying out loud, when Trump a few years ago was trying to argue that the poem that's on the Statue of Liberty really shouldn't be considered part of the Statue of Liberty, I mean, that was just that was outright. It had to be embarrassing, but you had so many Republicans just standing there. Now, the other thing is again, I've said this in the last couple of shows, Trumpism didn't start with Trump. McConnell has been, completely one-sided in politics since he took over as Speaker. he immediately, I know I've said this before, said that I am going to guarantee that Obama is a one-termer. And
Right.
it just, and then it didn't even start after they lost the midterm election. It didn't even stop, pardon me. And so, this goes back, I think, at least to the rise of talk radio in the 90s. We've talked about that. Trump is a huge symptom, was generated, by a problem that, that they represent a culture that is fundamentally dying. The culture that gave Reagan and Nixon their landslide wins doesn't exist anymore, not in the same way, and they want to hold on to that. And so Republicans have the problem. They've got to make a choice, one or the other. And I think that there are people like Ben Sass and even to some degree Mitt Romney and the rest who are wanting to move on and bring their party into the 21st century. But you got fundamentalist religion, that is in the way. It's still a major force in politics, and that started with the moral majority, and I don't know what they do. I think they need to change, to go back. I mean, when the Republicans started, it was started by a bunch of abolitionists and socialists. They were the left. This was the party that drew endorsements from Karl Marx. They were the front, the liberal front. The Democrats were kind of the reaction, at that point. How it changed over the decades, we've talked about a bit. But where are the Pete McCloskeys? Where are the
Exactly.
Even just the Eisenhowers? I mean, Eisenhower is more liberal than half the Democrats today. So I don't know where they go with it, but it's kind of hard. And I actually, as much as I'm not a Republican, I wish they would revive so we could have real policy discussions in this country.
Yeah, as long as we could agree on the facts and agree on reality, then we could have a real debate. Yeah, I agree. The Republican Party was founded in Ripon, Wisconsin. It was it 1856 or 1854, somewhere in the mid 1850s, as the Abolitionist Party. And and then you get Lincoln. And but parties morph over time. Things change for sure. But you're right. The Republican Party is joined at the hip with certain factions in the evangelical societies, and that brings to the fore a lot of the culture war issues that they are so associated with right now. And I don't know how it gets fixed, and I don't think anybody knows how it gets fixed. Even if you listen to and read Republicans, there's nobody with a good idea at this point.
Right. So we have, why don't we talk a little bit about California politics? It does look like there is going to be a recall effort, whether they make it or not, but definitely the former mayor of San Diego, conservative standard bearer, has announced. And can he defeat Newsom in a modern election? Of course, Newsom will probably face a challenge in the primary. Well, actually, no, it doesn't work that way. We don't have that kind of primary anymore. There'll probably be, other progressives running, and then it's the top two. Will Newsom even come in the top two? If he doesn't change things around, his rollout of the vaccine is really was really sad. I mean, what was he doing all these months if he wasn't organized for the potential rollout? Maybe he thought there was going to be more help from the federal government, but why did he think that? Because he was kissing up to Trump so many times? I'm sorry. It just was, so we've got this problem, but what happens if a Republican does get elected? Again, I don't think it's going to happen. I just don't think the Republicans have numbers anymore. But what do you want to say about that?
Well, it's interesting. The former San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer, just this last couple of days is, and you're right, he's a conservative Republican from that San Diego area, obviously, but he's trying to brand himself a moderate. In almost every interview he's had over the last few days after he formally announced his candidacy, and in things that have been issued by him so far in writing, He's trying to claim that he's a moderate because obviously that would be the only path possible for a Republican in California, given the way politics in California are right now. So I don't know. I don't expect him to win, but Newsom is wounded at this point, and definitely not the rising star that he once was. Now, who else might challenge? I don't know. Have you heard names so far?
No,
Yeah.
I haven't. But if he runs, that somebody carrying Trump's standard will have to run. How many votes they will get, we don't know. But that will split the Republican vote. Point is the Democratic vote might be split as well. There is Newsom is definitely going to be challenged from the left of the party. There's no getting around that.
Right.
So who that will be, I have no idea either.
I don't know. I was kind of wondering over the weekend, just listening to some interviews and reading some things. I was wondering if maybe Katie Porter might think about it. She's made a name around the state, even though she's a congressperson representing only one small part of the state. People know her, and she's good. And so I don't know. We'll see. But I don't expect Faulkner to win. But I think it's I have to give him credit because he is noticing an opportunity here, given the pandemic and how, and actually very few governors around the state have, get an A+ on this, and which is probably not surprising. I don't know who would have predicted this or been prepared for it anyway, but Faulkner is noticing an opportunity and he's going for it. And I think he's reading things correctly. If there was ever a time for a Republican to make a run statewide, it might be right now.
Well, yeah, definitely. And definitely if there's a recall, because you'll get, the last time around you had Dianne Feinstein, I'm sorry, with the absolute stupidity of it saying, well, I'm not going to vote for anybody, for a replacement because I oppose the recall itself. And, with that, whatever influence she had were people not voting for Bustamante, who could have been the one who defeated Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? I mean, so, I hope that the party leadership is not that stupid this time around if there is a recall vote. But we'll see. But there are other people that could possibly run, or Barbara Lee. Even our own Huffington, if my prediction of him being the attorney general comes down. But Newsom announced today that there will not be a replacement for the attorney general announced until after Becerra is confirmed, because there's no guarantee.
Do you think Eric Garcetti might run if there's a recall? If Newsom avoids a recall problem, then probably not. But if he is the subject of a recall and is that wounded, do you think Garcetti might take a shot at it?
He certainly has got the popularity for it. I'm not sure why, because Los Angeles is one of the worst hit cities for COVID, but I don't know that you can blame it on him. But I know a couple of expats from Los Angeles who just moved up here, within the past few months, right as the pandemic started, actually, and they listened to Garcetti's podcasts religiously. Yeah. They really respect him. They're progressives. That's another possibility.
Yeah,
certainly.
Yeah, so, we'll see.
All right. And of course, the impact of that, if Faulkner does win, is what happens with Dianne Feinstein. She's had some senior moments. She's refusing to retire, even though people are trying to pressure her to do it. Insisting that she's going to run again and whenever she comes up again. So it's that. And so what if something happens to her and then we have a Republican, the Democrats lose their majority right now? We kind of had a scare last week when Vermont Senator Leahy went to the hospital. Turned out not to be that big a deal, that they were just being really careful because he's 500 years old or something, like a lot of senators, and that that majority, Democratic majority, is really fragile.
Yeah, it's 50-50 plus Kamala Harris right now, and Senator Feinstein is 87, I believe. She turns 88 this year at some point, if she hasn't already, and who knows? Maybe she decides to retire halfway through. Maybe health issues force her to retire. at some point through a 6-year term? I don't know. But if there is a Republican governor, that Republican governor would certainly appoint a Republican to replace her, which would tip the balance of the United States Senate with just that one appointment.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're getting towards the top of the hour. We're not quite there yet, but I want to go back and talk a little bit more about Joe Biden. He seems to be maintaining his popularity. He's at his lowest, he's still above Trump was at his highest during the 4 years. He is, I think one poll had him at 63% popularity. I think, of course, Rasmussen is the lowest, had him at like 49% popularity, but all the others pretty much, with one exception that came out today, I'm forgetting which one it was, have him at in the mid 50s. He definitely needs to get something done. It's I mean, they're talking about getting this bill through, the coronavirus bill through. But he and as Bernie Sanders said when he was interviewed, he said, we expect to get this done in 2 weeks, and for the Senate, that's a warp speed, right? Sure. So it's just but people need things done now. We're hurting, right? Yeah. And every day I go looking for some progress on the coronavirus bill, and there's not really much being announced. These people are in, they're supposedly at work all day long. I think they really need to come up with a narrative as to why they're doing it. Obviously, it doesn't happen quickly. I don't know if the bill still has to be written or not. I thought it was introduced, but they and we're learning a lot about reconciliation. So how long does Biden maintain this popularity before people start to say, what's happening with that? Because that's the most important thing right now. Other stuff, will be important, but they want that other $1,400 that was taken, they believe was taken from them by politics, and they want those they want those vaccines getting into people's arms. How long can they go without that?
I agree. We can't get back to normal until. I believe some of the scientists are saying 225 million people are vaccinated, somewhere in there. Right. Like 70% of the country or something needs to be vaccinated before we're back to normal. And that sets aside the whole issue of variants of this coronavirus, but that's a whole other issue. But yeah, people have to get vaccinated before we get back to normal. So that's a huge issue. I believe I heard President Biden say he hopes to have this signed by March the 14th. I think the Senate wants to get done with it. You're right. In a few weeks, of course, they got impeachment coming up, so they're going to have to, juggle some things there. But I think Biden wants it done within the first week or two of March. So. Let's hope that happens. But yeah, deliverables, that's what the American people need right now. Something to get done.
Something to get done. I think March is too long, but that's just me. We're now at the time of our show where we provide our predictions. I actually kind of provided one accidentally earlier, but why don't you go ahead?
Okay, and I want to know what that one that you provided earlier was. Two quick things. One, I've been reading lately, and I think I'm on board with this. I think Stacey Abrams, who of course was so instrumental in winning those 2 Senate seats from Georgia and getting the Democrats into power in the Senate. I think Stacey Abrams is going to run for governor next time around, and I think she might win this time. And so I think that's going to happen. So keep an eye on that. I also think that in North Carolina, there's a Senate race just on the horizon. And I'm looking at a former state Supreme Court justice in North Carolina named Sherry Beasley. I've read some of the things she's written, and I have not heard her speak, but I've read a lot that she's written, and I think she may have a chance. So remember that name in North Carolina, Sherry Beasley, former state Supreme Court justice there.
All right. The prediction I gave was that there were going to be more Republicans voting, but that they would not get the 67 to
right.
impeach, but that it would, a lot of them were going to be put on the defensive, and so there's it's going to come out somewhere in the middle. But the my prediction actually is going to be that I believe that while it's been tabled, that the getting rid of the filibuster is going to come back, because Biden now has something like 60 judges to appoint. He's also got to he's also way behind on the appointments because the Senate hasn't been doing it because of this agreement that they had to reach, and McConnell just kind of doing what he usually does and blocking stuff from happening. So they're going to probably start trying to block, 2 or 3 of Biden's appointees to the cabinet. And there's going to be real problem with once Biden starts nominating judges. And as I said, there's about 60. I think there's like 3 appellate court replacements, and Republicans are going to obstruct. And the Democrats are going to have to revisit the filibuster. And the problem is Joe Manchin is against doing away with the filibuster. So I think it's going to become an issue again once we're done with impeachment.
Yeah, I agree. They did get Joe Manchin, though, to agree to vote for the COVID relief stimulus. And so at least there's that. But that was only after the governor of West Virginia said, we really need this. Please vote for this. Yeah. So, yeah.
And also Kamala Harris went and did interviews in West Virginia. So
she did, and good for her.
In Arizona, yeah.
Right.
All right. Well, that covers us from that covers this show tonight. Next week we'll be 2 days into the impeachment trial. That will probably take up a good portion. We'll see if the coronavirus bill is any closer to being passed. We'll probably learn a lot more about reconciliation. But again, plenty of news, and I also expect that there's going to be some call to sanction Ted Cruz and Hawley, and we'll see what happens with that. Till next time.